Hey, I'm Vlad with GlobMarble, and this is one of those crappy laminate countertops that look cheap. They're not fooling anybody, so we're gonna restore it. I'm gonna show you how to turn your existing countertops into concrete countertops. It's gonna look completely different. The product I'm gonna be using is called MicroTek, and it's an extremely strong, thin-set concrete overlay. If you ever wanna know the specific details of any of our products, like the PSI of the concrete, the water mixing ratio, we have very helpful technical data sheets on our website that are gonna help you and give you all the information that you could need and more. Now, assuming we wanna make these countertops last and look good for as long as possible, first we gotta prep them. So this is a hardy backer board. It's a cement-based board, and a lot of overlays will bond to it a lot better than in some cases they will to primers. So the first thing I wanna do is measure the board. And I'll show you how easy it is to cut this type of board. Let me go get a level to make sure the cut is straight. Regular box cutter knife, and then we're gonna hit it a couple of times, maybe 2 or 3 times on that edge. Take it and break away the excess. Now it's time to attach that hardy board onto our countertop. I put it down, and just so I know I have a perfect match, it's not crooked anywhere, I'm gonna put a little piece of melamine just for it to be kind of like a border, a liner, something to keep it straight. Countertop is flush with the back wall. Now the hardy backer board is flush with the back wall. Then I'm just going to use a nail gun. If you don't have one of these, or you don't have a good compressor, you could use drywall screws also. So that's not going anywhere. Now let's talk about the corners. So both the Backsplash and the countertop itself has rounded corners. It looks all right for this, but when you have rounded corners on concrete, it's something I don't like. It reminds me of the 1960s. It looks a little bit dated, in exception to those 3D printed homes, which look really cool if you manage to do it right. I want mine to be square though, so I'm just gonna go ahead, put this on there, and then touch up later. Before I do that though, there is a little bit extra up here. I cut with a little bit to spare, so I'm gonna go ahead and sand this off with some 60 grit sanding paper. And now the last thing we're going to be doing today is the MicroTek is really thin, so I'm worried of it getting into those gaps over there and then being visible, so I'm going to patch that up. I'm going to use the same material, MicroTek, but with a lot more water that I'm going to be adding tomorrow. I want it to be almost like a putty consistency. And before adding it onto the cement board, you have to make sure that it's damp, because this stuff is like a sponge. It absorbs a lot of moisture. When you put the MicroTek on it and don't have it damp, It's gonna suck all that moisture directly out of the MicroTek, gonna make it extremely hard to work with. And if you're really unlucky, what it does is it sucks so much out that it becomes almost like crumbly and sandy, and it's not gonna bond or adhere well. So this stuff isn't supposed to be wet. It's not supposed to be dripping, but just damp to the touch. We've got it down. Scrub it in. Doesn't have to be pretty. And then I'm just gonna remove the excess. So this is the amount of MicroTek I'm going to be using. It's about 1 kilo. Again, check those data sheets to get all the coverage, the mixing ratios, all that good stuff. But I'm going to be using the white, even though we sell both white and gray pre-bagged mixes. Then I'm going to be using the color silver. It comes in these color packs. It's 1 color pack per bag of concrete. Now your question is, why am I using the white one and coloring it gray instead of just using the gray? There's 2 answers. The first answer is this was a ripped bag that we got sent back. I'm just going to be using it. And the second answer is that concrete has a slight green tint to it. All natural concrete's going to look like that. You can even see they took that in mind when designing the pigments for the white concrete. It has a little bit of that green tint. I don't want that, even though it's not going to look like natural concrete. I want it to be gray. Measured the amount that I need on one of these jewelry scales, and it's time to start mixing it. I'm gonna hit the sides of the bucket just to make sure that there's no unmixed material being stuck on the sides. We don't want that dry, clumpy, unmixed material. It's gonna ruin the surface. And also add in our pigment. And you see how I'm getting these kind of like streaks of pigment right here that aren't getting fully mixed in. That's because I just messed up. What I should have done instead of what I did do was I should have put the pigment inside of the water and mixed it up with the water. I just didn't know how much I was going to use. I ended up using a little bit less than I anticipated, and I got to mix for a little bit longer now to make sure that everything gets incorporated. Again, let's go ahead and dampen our surface. I like using a pump sprayer, the one that I'm using right now, because if I'm sitting here using a large surface like this and then just keep pulling the trigger over and over and over again, your arm, your finger gets tired. Pump sprayer is a lot better for this. Make sure the surface isn't wet, just damp. The material goes on pretty thin. It's very, very liquid. And what I'm doing right now by going back and forth is a principle from using epoxy that a lot of epoxy guys do. It's called back rolling. I don't know if you would consider this back rolling or not, but to get the same thickness everywhere, what you got to do is use the roller back and forth, and then you get an even thickness of the epoxy everywhere. This does the same exact thing for the MicroTek. Now when you're using this material, you're going to notice that I'm not the best guy at troweling. I'm not proficient at this stuff. So you're going to be seeing all these lines. I'm going to try to make sure you don't see it. So I'm going to have to do 2 coatings because I'm going to have to sand this down to make it completely flat. If you've worked with similar products like Venetian plaster, you only have to use 1 coating of this. And this lip I'm gonna have to sand off also. So I'm gonna wait until this is ready to be sanded. So the concrete's not fully cured, but it's dry to the touch. So while it's not fully cured, while it's still soft and malleable, I'm gonna hit this edge, take that nasty stuff off. So since I'm doing 2 coats anyways, I might as well show you guys another option that you could do using the MicroTek, and that's using stencils. This method you can inlay 3D patterns into your walls, your countertops, whatever you're using the MicroTek on, and it's gonna look really pretty. I couldn't find exactly the one that I wanted online on Amazon, so what I ended up doing was printing the pattern out and cutting it out myself onto a piece of cardboard. This whole thing took me so long to do. It took me all day yesterday, basically. I don't want to do it again, because the plan is I want 1 row on the backsplash and 1 row on the counter itself. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the stuff that I already have. These are the things that I cut out of here, and I'm going to recycle them. Now let's pay attention to how messy this looks. It doesn't look nearly as straight as the one on the bottom. Then remember, I'm going to be sitting here with a trowel and moving it around. It's going to be a disaster. The only solution I could think of is I'm going to use our double-side tape. I have a concern that the double-side tape is going to be really hard to remove because this stuff really sticks. It's a really good product. But that's a concern for tomorrow. Let's do this today. So now that I've got all my stencils cut out, I want to make sure that they're going to be completely in line, perfectly straight line. So I'm going to clamp down this ruler and then use this as a guide. And also, I don't want it to start just completely right here because I know on the other side it's going to get cut in half. It's going to look unsymmetrical, so it's got to be cut in half in the middle somehow, right? Let's figure out how this is going to look. Great, now we can remove that double side tape and start putting it on. Again, I want to make sure this is damp, not wet, but damp. So I just mixed up the material. What I ended up doing was I added a little bit less water than last time, and I also made sure to make extra. I made about 3 times as much as I did last time because this is going to be a much thicker coat. Let's see how it goes on. First, I'm going to be focusing on the pattern itself. I'm worried that the pattern's going to get like bug holes inside of it and not look nice. So I want to try to like vibrate it, kind of like this, right? If you vibrate it, that removes those bubbles. Now it's time to remove those stencils. Let's see how hard it's going to be to get rid of the tape on the bottom. Now when it comes to polishing concrete, you can't use regular sanding pads. Even something as coarse as 40 grit is not gonna work. You're gonna have to use diamond pads. Usually, while starting to polish, you start at the coarsest grit, which is usually the lowest number. You start at 50 to 100 to 200 to 400 to 800 to 1,500. I want to be a little bit conservative with this. I want to see whether it's going to rip the concrete off, because this is such a delicate edge. I also did one more thing to make sure that it doesn't rip off the edge. I waited a week since I casted this just to make sure that the concrete has that complete full cure. It's the strongest that it's going to be. You don't have to do this, but it's better to be safe than sorry. I also don't want to start at 50. I want to start at 100. If that's too fine of a grit, I'm going to go back down to 50. Another thing you guys should know is that it's really important that you use a mask, a ventilator for this, because the concrete dust is pretty nasty.
No, I'm definitely going to switch it to the 50 grit. I don't like the way that the 100 grit is taking so long.
So I've been grinding at this one section for a pretty long time now, and I noticed that this doesn't act like regular concrete at all. The two coats have completely bonded to each other. Nothing is coming off. With regular concrete, that wouldn't happen. God knows what type of additives they added into this mix. And the second thing is that, again, I've been grinding this thing for a long time. I wish I did this the day after I put the MicroTek on. Don't make the same mistakes that I did with this. So since some of the tape has ripped off the MicroTek and there's a few patches that I want to make elsewhere, I'm going to go ahead and mix up the same material before I go ahead and grind it any further, just to make sure that I don't have to do too much work later. And I'm going to start patching right now. The same exact mix as last time. I want to say one more thing about these stencils. They were a pain in the ass to make out of the cardboard. If you want to do it yourself, you can, but just because of this video, we made stencils that we sell on GlobMarble.com. You could buy these, and since they're made out of polyurethane rubber, they are reusable. They're 13 inches long, however many you need. You go ahead and you connect them. They connect on both ends, and just cut them off where you need to. So I only went up to 200 grit for one reason. This is going to be a countertop, so I do want to make it sealed, because imagine you spill some mustard on this, on some unsealed concrete, you take it off, the smell is always going to be there, the stain's always going to be there. So I'm going to use a high gloss sealer, but before that, I'm going to use something called EcoStain, which is going to accent the concrete and give it a little bit of character. You don't have to use it, but I want to. And the dilution rate is 4:1 parts stain to water, but I'm gonna use way less stain than that because I don't want it to be too dark. Well, let's see what it looks like. And again, if I don't like the way that this looks, I could always go back, since it's a water-based product, and remove it. And you should also know that this is exactly what it's going to look like after it's been sealed. The sealer acts kind of like a liquid, right? So the wet look is exactly how it's going to look. This right now is going to dry up. It's going to look a lot lighter than it does right now, but that's not what the finished product is going to look. You have to make sure that you like the product while it's still wet. All right, so I'm really happy that I have some variation in the color. It's not so bland, but the variation, like the spots where it's dark versus the spots where it's light, it's not blurry enough. It's very, throws right into your face, especially with these dots and stuff. So what I'm gonna do is, I usually done this with water. I'm gonna take water and then move it around, but I'm gonna try something different. I'm gonna try it with denatured alcohol, just so that it can evaporate a lot quicker. And I'm gonna see the results a little bit better. Hopefully avoid streaks also. You see how that just immediately starts fading away. And we can see how those variations of color start to get a little bit blurrier and not so in your face. So the MicroTek has been cured for a week now. This is all completely dry. There's no more water left on it. And now it's time to seal it. The sealer I'm going to be using is the PC12 solvent-based tabletop sealer. It's a tabletop sealer because it's food safe. You wouldn't want to use anything that you'd use on the floor on something like a countertop. It's a 3 parts A to 1 part B mix ratio. And I'm going to be applying it using a foam roller. I especially want to use the foam roller because I do have these dips inside there, and the foam roller can easily squeeze in to those little cracks and crevices and get everything. We're gonna go ahead, pour it on in a little strip, just like this. And again, this is a high gloss sealer, so it's gonna give us that nice mirror finish, mirror look. And you see how the concrete's getting a little bit darker. This is permanent. It's not gonna get any lighter once you seal it. It's not exactly like water, but it does get darker. And now you see I'm rolling it in the opposite direction. This is a process called back rolling. And what it does is it makes sure I get an even coverage of the material across the entire surface. So I'm gonna go north to south, east to west, north to south a couple of times. Not only do I get a perfect coverage with this, but it also ensures that I'm not going to be left with roller marks, these nasty little lines that a roller could sometimes leave if you put it down improperly. Look at that beautiful high gloss surface the next day. I'm kidding, I meant to do that. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a second coating of this stuff on for 2 reasons. 1, there's added protection, and 2, since this is a concrete product, in some places it's high gloss, but in other places it absorbed a little bit more of that product. So I'm gonna do 2 coats. If it's been over 12 hours since you put on your first coat, you're gonna have to sand the first coat down with 220 grit sandpaper, wipe that off with denatured alcohol, and then put on your second coat. So the last step is attaching the backsplash, and I was originally going to do drywall screws, just screw it in from the bottom, but I'll be damned if I take this thing and ruin it, kind of make it go sideways. It starts peeking out the face. So I'm not going that route. Instead, I'm going to be using these corner braces. So you've made it to the end of my video, but now I want to ask you for a quick favor. See, the YouTube algorithm gets tricked into showing my video to a lot more people if a lot of people comment on it. So criticize me, praise me, or just ask a question. As long as you leave a comment, I'm gonna appreciate it a lot. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.